Hello, I'm Charles Mallet with a UK column interview. Today, I'm very pleased to have Alistair Williams with me. He is a comedian and commentator, and notes from this interview will be posted at ukcolumn.org. So please be sure to review those and send them on. Now, Alistair, a very warm welcome to UK Column. Thanks very much for joining me. Many of the audience, I'm sure, will be aware not just of you as an individual, but of your great array of work over the years. What I'd like to do before we deal with all the various issues that confront us today is to go back, not through all the sands of time, but some of them, to the sort of the genesis of your career as a comedian and what it was that led you down that path. It's a big and bold step to enter that world. And I would like to understand better the inspirations upon you and your aspirations back then when you were starting out.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. I guess initially, I always thought I would have liked to have been a comedian. Like on my 18th birthday, I went to the Comedy Store in Leicester Square, which is not a usual choice for someone who's 18. Usually go to nightclubs or that sort of thing. But I wanted to go to the Comedy Store in Leicester Square. I always looked at comedians and thought, oh man, I'd love to do that. I was always sort of one of the joker type in class with my friends. I always thought I'd like to do that. And then it took me till I was about 30 to try it. And I went and did an open mic. And I realized that, I thought I was going to be really intimidated by how good everyone was. And I was like, oh man, these guys are rubbish. Like I could be rubbish. I can be as good as them. They're rubbish. But everyone is when you start. And when I started, I was rubbish. And then, so I was just sort of doing it in my spare time. And then eventually I started getting paid to do it. And it just sort of took over as my full-time job. But initially I wanted to be like, famous, and I wanted to be in Hollywood, and I wanted to be this great comedian that everyone loved. And, I had those sort of childish hopes and dreams about it. But yeah, things have changed quite a bit since then. But, that was the original plan.
That's a good start point, I think, certainly for me, but for the audience as well. So let's go further forward, because obviously you've been through some big ups and downs over the last few years, which I think I would be right in saying are effectively traced back to the Brexit in a Burger King period, but or not. But either way, at what point did things start to change?
Okay, a good question. I did used to have to go to Edinburgh, and you'd do like an hour-long comedy show to sort of showcase yourself. And I did this show called Food, where it was an hour-long comedy show, and I was explaining to people that, people are like, what can I eat to be healthy? And essentially the point of the show was the food that you can eat to be healthy is the food that's sort of naturally here on the earth. That's either, animals or growing out the ground. And it was a really sort of an educational message about food. And that got sort of agents interested in me. But I quickly figured out that they weren't interested in sort of helping people eat the right foods. They were interested in, changing what I was saying, really. And that's when I got my first sort of TV agent. And when I got my first sort of TV agent, I really noticed how much I was being sort of coerced to change what I was saying into something completely different. And I really didn't get on with my, sort of TV agent because I didn't want to change what I was saying. And then Brexit Burger King came slightly after that, which was sort of the piece of comedy that sort of made me go sort of really viral. And that also made the comedy industry, or whoever runs it, the entertainment industry, decide that I had to be sort of completely erased at that point, because I was sort of I was doing it for myself, really. They'd already told me that I wasn't going to be back on the television or anything like that. When I left this agent, they made sure that I wouldn't be able to be sort of mainstream famous anymore. So they sort of destroyed my career, this mainstream agent that I left. And then Brexit Burger King was me sort of saying, okay, well, I'll just sort of go viral by myself then. I don't feel like I needed to be on the television. I was like, I can just go on YouTube and put my stuff up there. And at the time, I didn't realize how controlled YouTube was. I was like, oh, we don't need the TV anymore. We've got YouTube. I can just, grow a big YouTube channel. And then later down the line, I sort of discovered that, oh, YouTube is exactly like the television, like Twitter is exactly like Netflix is exactly like television. It's all controlled to one degree or another. But yeah, Brexit Burger King was sort of my most popular viral piece of content and the beginning of the end, basically. Which is the opposite to how it should work. It should be like, because Brexit at the time, all these comedians were trying to do comedy about Brexit. And it was all the same. It was all, oh, if you voted for Brexit, you're a big racist. And it was a million different versions of that on the BBC and everywhere. And mine was the first bit of comedy, I think, really that took a sort of opposite view, or just a different, not even opposite view, just a different view to that. And it should, if the comedy industry was real, it should have made the whole comedy industry go, wow, here's this guy and he's saying something new and interesting about Brexit and everyone thinks it's funny. Instead, it was like, this guy has to be destroyed. You must never hear from this comedian again. And it really just sort of exposed the hypocrisy, I guess, in the comedy industry. And my career, if you like, it really just sort of exposed the comedy industry as being fake, because if the comedy industry was real and they were sort of out there looking for comedians that are popular, that make people laugh and sort of broadcasting their reach, then they would have everything to do with me. But they don't want anything to do with me, because comedy is not really about that. I'm sure some people might struggle with it. What do you mean it's not about that? Like, they're not trying to pick the funniest comedians to make you all laugh. That's the last thing they're doing. There's a real agenda to everything in the entertainment space, but especially comedy. Especially comedy, which is one that people think, oh, comedy, surely that's the one place where you must all be free. It's like, yeah, that's the reason why it's the most tightly policed, because it is the place where you would expect that everyone can just, say whatever they want. And that's the reason why it doesn't work like that at all, basically.
I think that's completely fascinating, and that is exactly what I would like to get into with you. You just at the beginning of that, you talked about being coerced, and being coerced, effectively, as I understand it, into creating particular material or only delivering particular material. You just go into a bit more detail on how exactly does that work in terms of having an agent or that space and coercion, and then getting to the point of finding that comedy is used as such a tool.
Firstly, people usually say, I don't understand how would that work, or how does it work? It's all sort of run through the agents and the managers. That's how they control everything. And what they say to the comedians is, oh, what you're sort of doing, it's not really going to work for television. This isn't really going to go across. This is not what the television companies are looking for. And by doing it that way, they can sort of control what the public is given as comedy. I'll give you an example. When I was just signed with this television agent, I had these pieces of material about how we shouldn't be on our phones so much. We shouldn't use our phones so much. Society's really been damaged by us all being on our phones. And this was one of my most popular jokes at the time. It was really, really popular. And I was supporting this comedian on tour who was way more famous than me, really, really popular comedian. And I was doing these jokes on his show. And he came backstage to me and said, hey, man, those iPhone jokes are amazing. They're incredible, man. That's some of the funniest stuff I've heard. And literally that same night, my agent, who was his agent as well, said, you can't use those iPhone jokes anymore. Right? And I was like, what do you mean I can't use those iPhone jokes anymore? Well, the crowd love him. And your biggest act, he said, that's my best stuff. There's no way I'm getting rid of that. Right? I'm like, what are you talking about? And I was supposed to support this guy on his whole tour. They took me off his tour the next day. I never worked with him again. Because I had displayed, I'm not going to be controlled by you. It's like they told me to not do this. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that, because I really believe people are on their phones too much. And people were laughing at my material. And I always had the sort of attitude of when an agent or a manager or someone would try and tell me how to do comedy or what I must say or what I couldn't say. I was like, I don't, you're an agent or a manager. Okay, fine. But you're not a comedian. Like, you've never done this before. You have 0 minutes experience, in what you're giving me advice. I'm not here to take your advice on how to be a comedian, how to make people laugh, because that's something that you don't know how to do. I'm the expert in that. The guy who I'm supporting on tour, he is really successful. And he told me that's a great piece of material. There's no way I'm going to stop doing this. And the way the agent or the manager might sell it to you is like, oh, well, it's not going to work on TV because, we got sponsors and stuff, and they might be sort of phone companies and they don't, So there's that, but there's also a real sort of political side to it. There's a real sort of everyone in comedy is left wing, or all the BBC comedy is left wing. And everyone in the comedy industry, comedians especially, like to think themselves as left wing because they still have this very sort of childish perception of like left is good and right people are mean and I'm a goodie, so I'm on the left and all the baddies are on the right. It's like they're, a 6-year-old or something. But the way we keep that going is anyone who steps outside of a rabid left wing position, anyone that steps outside of that, you won't work anywhere. People won't book you for shows and that sort of thing, and they'll and that'll be their excuse. Like when they cancelled me after the Brexit Burger King thing, their excuse for doing that was, well, you were on stage with Nigel Farage because they invited me to come and do this piece of comedy at one of the Brexit rallies. And back in the day, I was even more naive about the whole thing. I used to think that the Brexit Party were the good guys. If they got in, everything would change. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come and do that. So I went and did that, and they took photos of me next to Farage, and all the comedy clubs and people used that as an excuse. It's like, we're canceling you because there's nothing wrong with the joke, because there never wasn't anything wrong with the joke. Even people who thought we should remain in the European Union were like, oh, this is a great joke. I'm laughing at this. It's funny. So there's no real premise for them to cancel me about that. So they were like, well, we're not canceling you for that, because they couldn't. They were like, but it's because you stood next to Nigel Farage. That's why. And I've actually reached the point where I perhaps even consider that I might have been put on stage next to Farage so that I could be cancelled for standing on stage next to Farage, basically. So that's the way that they control all elements of comedy and the entertainment industry. But especially comedy is policed. A lot of the comedy you see on television has canned laughter put over it. And on my one only time they put me on TV, I remember I went to the recording, and literally probably 19 out of the 21 comedians that were being recorded for television, they died on their butt is the expression in the industry. They were out there doing their jokes to no laughs whatsoever. Right, the in studio audience were just like, oh, this is awful, And then when I watched it back on the TV, oh, these guys were absolutely killing it. They were cutting to the crowd, falling around laughing, and I realized like, this is why a lot of people, they watch comedy on the television and they say, I don't get it. Like, I don't find this funny. Like, but everyone's laughing. It's like, they're probably not. Like, they record a really sort of rabid left wing position and they put canned laughter over the top of it. And that convinces you as the listener, like, even if you're not laughing, it's like, well, everyone else agrees with this. So, look, this whole audience is cracking up about how amazing feminism is. So you must be, way outside of where everyone else is thinking if you don't think this is funny. So it's a real vehicle for them manipulating how people perceive everyone thinks, is putting TV comedy on. And just to add one further point to this, I used to be when I had my TV agent, a lot of the guys that I was performing with, they would be really left wing guys, and they would go to their TV recordings and they would sort of privately say to each other, does anyone else find it weird how crazy the crowd goes for our stuff? Like, not even the punchlines. They'll be like, I'm just up there and the setup, and they're all like, yeah. And they're just like, it's really like strange. It's like, yeah, like, the whole thing is manipulated to the point where even the left wing comics are just like, really putting me off how the audience are just falling over themselves, at these setup recordings to, really lay it on thick. Because sometimes they use canned laughter and sometimes they just use an audience full of planted people who are just going to go nuts to anything you say, basically.
Fascinating insight. I mean, for the vast majority of us who have absolutely no idea how the comedy industry or the sort of the minutiae of the performance side of it would work, but I think it's much more obvious to people in mainstream media, in say the film industry, where exactly like you're describing, we're constantly given the impression that everybody thinks that, so therefore you must think the same. But comedy, I think, is one of those areas, exactly like you say, that people overlook. They don't imagine that can be the case. But so this is what you saw. What did you find that you were working alongside other people who did see it, or who, as it would appear to us now, like a lot of mainstream journalists who, okay, notwithstanding the sort of vested interest side of it, who appear just not to be able to see it? Were there people around you that did see this, and how did they react?
I mean, it's in their best interest not to see it. They're quite clever in that everyone who's at this sort of level, sort of they're on the TV, they got an agent, they're all on the gravy train, so to speak. You know, they don't want to see the things that I'm seeing. And I remember I would go to other comedians, and I reached the stage where this agent was um, directly trying to ruin my career because I wouldn't toe the line. So it's reached the point where the person who's supposed to be trying to help my career was actively trying to ruin it. Like, and I mean, like, if I was on the radio at 12:30, they would tell me it starts at 1:30. So I'd be an hour late, and they would consistently do this. And the other acts that I was signed to this agent, they've got the same agent as me and we're friends. So I'm like, they're ruining my stuff on purpose. But they were like, they would say like, nah, I don't believe that. I'm like, well, look, I got the evidence right here, the email. I don't want to see it. I want to see it. Like, no, they wouldn't want to see it. Like, no one wants to see it. It's not like I couldn't prove what's going on. It's just, no one really wants to admit that this is going on because 99% of people are just more than happy to go along with it. And they keep you so anxious in the comedy entertainment industry. Everyone's desperate to get their agent. And once they've got their agent, they don't want to lose their agent. And, they really sort of, if you go to the Edinburgh Comedy Festival and see the anxiety that is in the performers, everyone, it's like they keep you like piranhas in a tank. And they've got everyone just desperate to cling onto their seat at the table. And, they get most of the comedians into debt by sending them up to Edinburgh every year and telling them they've got to spend 40 grand on a show and hope that someone who works for PR will see you or something. Anyway, they've got everyone desperate just to hang on to this chance at fame that they have. And 99.9% of the people in that industry, they are not interested at all in taking any sort of a actual moral position on anything. They just want to be famous. They just want to be on the BBC or, and I'm very vocal. And I was on that Brexit Burger King video. I was very vocal about the fact that the BBC are just this terrible organization with a record of, covering up for, Jimmy Savile and this sort of thing. I'm like, why would you ever want to work for this organization? It's horrendous, in my view, propaganda institution that's just ruining this country. And, but 90% of comedians are just like, hey, I'm on BBC, like, check this out, mum and dad, it's great for them. Like, no one really has any sort of morals in that industry, really, because if you do, they just kick you out, so you really do have to make a choice. But fortunately for me, in a way, they'd already sort of booted me out and rejected me, if you like, for not, playing ball. So, what did I have to lose? And Brexit Burger King was just me kind of saying like, hey, just leave me alone because I can do this. I can do this by myself. And I gave the establishment a bit of a black eye with the Brexit Burger King thing, just because people might not realize how bad things are, but so this Brexit Burger King thing, for example, it was sort of anti the European Union in a way, right? When I would go on comedy tours with other comedians around Europe, we'd all be using the same promoter, right? And we'd all be staying in the same hotel. My room would always be terrible. And it'd be tiny, it'd be small. I'm like, you guys' room's terrible? Like, no. I was like, what is going on? And then one time the guy who works on reception of the hotel was like, hey, he let the cat out of the bag. He was like, hey, you're the anti-European Union guy. Enjoy your room. I'm like, oh, right. That's why, and I think there is a kind of, it's kind of like a digital black spot that they put on people like me. Like my Twitter won't grow, my YouTube doesn't grow. Like it's not as simple as they canceled my YouTube channel. It's like, no. The whole thing is connected. All the social media networks are connected. Like if you are sort of marked out as someone who is trouble, who they don't want everyone listening to you, no one's going to be able to find you, basically. And they can make your life miserable in a number of different ways. And they were already doing that with me before Brexit Burger King, but they were certainly sort of doing it afterwards. So, there's no chance that they're ever going to allow me to have any sort of a mainstream career. But that's not even something I'm interested in anymore anyway, so it's fine. But, the whole sort of social credit score system that people think only exists in China, I'm pretty sure it's here already. They're not sort of overt about it. You know what I mean?
I think you're quite right. I'm certain it's absolutely here, and that goes back to the the jokes about iPhones and the how critical it is to the system functioning, that everybody is glued to a device all the time. I think the last bit really, as the newly appointed or relatively newly appointed chief executive of Twitter, or X, said, freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach, I think was her catchphrase.
Right.
But what you're talking about in terms of taking a moral line or a decision, a choice, which, going back to your initial aspirations, you have been faced with a difficult fork in the road, in effect, that the illusion of the world of comedy sort of shattered around you. And yet, obviously, you have decided to stick with comedy as something that is, still a very big part of your life. How did you, I don't know how hard the decision that was to make, but how did you make that decision? Did you question, that it might be something that you would get out of altogether?
There was a time when I wasn't sure whether I would keep doing it, but it's what I'm supposed to be doing, and I've always been sure of that. And I'm pretty sure it's what God made me to do, and I'm pretty sure that God gave me specific talents, and He's expecting me to use them to tell people the truth. Because if you're really good at stand-up comedy, people will listen to you because they're laughing, and when someone's laughing at something you say, they're admitting that it's true. So, like no other art form or medium, you could change someone's mind with stand-up comedy, because if you make them laugh, they're sort of agreeing with you. If I'm just talking about, it doesn't matter what it is. Let's say I'm talking about climate change, and I've got the whole audience laughing at climate change. Well, really, they're sort of saying, hang on, maybe this whole thing is a bit silly. This is a bit ridiculous, and it's not so serious as I thought. You can really change people's mind. You can change people's ideas. And I'm 100% certain that the talents I had are God given, and that He's created me to use these talents to tell people the truth. And I couldn't care less what they think at the BBC or the Netflix. I'm doing what He tells me to do. So I'm going to keep doing it, even if it's only on a small scale. Right now I'm just sort of doing the comedy circuit, and they won't let me in the big clubs anymore. But I'm sort of beneath that, and I'm sort of doing my own thing. But that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. So I never really, came that close to giving up altogether. But there was a time when I was doing more stuff on sort of social media and more stuff on YouTube, just because, that's where my career sort of took me, sort of thing. And then they had the whole sort of 3-year period where there was no comedy shows anyway. So it's just as well I had something to do during that time. But now I'm sort of getting more back into doing live stand-up comedy, really. But I never considered, stopping doing it. It's like, I'm good at this. Why would I stop doing this? Especially when, there's no one I've ever offended. I find it, I'm one of the few people you can find who's cancelled, and there's no discernible reason why. Like, you can't even point to a single person who's like, oh, he offended me about this. It's so, the people that they really want to cancel, they just do it quietly. They shadow ban you. They take away your channels. They reduce your reach, so to speak. The people that they publicly cancel, like Andrew Tate, for example, you can't go anywhere without hearing this guy's name everywhere. You know what I mean? It's like you go on these big Piers Morgan about how cancelled I am. It's like, oh, come on, guys. Like the people, they own everything, including the people that are cancelled. Like, the people who are famously cancelled are part of the whole thing. There's very little legitimate voices out there that have, big followings. I don't know if there's any.
That's completely fair enough. I think it's a very accurate summary of the situation. But tell me, I mean, and anyone, as I say, I should imagine a vast majority of the audience will be familiar with some of your material. They may have even had the pleasure of listening to you live. So I speak, I think, for everybody when I say we're absolutely delighted that you didn't give up comedy. But do you find now, having seen things for what they are, and feeling, I think I'm right in saying that you have, like you've just said, you have a clearer path in life, has that made a difference to the connection that you feel with an audience?
Yeah, I guess so. comedy audience is a really sort of honest group of people. They're just out to have a good time. They want to have a laugh. And if you make them laugh, they're enjoying themselves and that's it. It's really not a difficult industry to run. It's like if the guy's up there speaking and everyone's laughing, he's good at this, get him to do it more. But like I say, having a connection with the audience and stuff like that has never been my problem. Like making people laugh has never been my problem. Like staying alive outside of the game, having made a room full of people laugh is the difficult bit, especially when you're sort of broaching the sort of topics that I want to broach, for example, enforced speech around pronouns, that sort of thing. 99% of people think that that's horrendous and they don't like it. And they don't really think that this man is a woman or this woman is a man. They know it's nonsense, right? But they're terrified. They're terrified to say anything because they know they're going to be relentlessly bullied. They'll probably lose their career. So we're in this sort of weird position where 95% of the population don't agree with this stuff. They can see how damaging there is, but they're not going to say anything because they're too worried about what it might cost them. Well, it's already cost me everything. And I'm in the position of somebody who should be saying something about this. It's the comedian's job is to point out the ridiculous. Like throughout the pandemic, for example, comedians that weren't talking about how ridiculous the whole thing is, I'm like, where are you guys? Like all the comedians I used to love, all the comedians I used to think were great and amazing, I couldn't care less for any of them after this pandemic. If you were a comedian, someone who's supposed to um, be making observations for a living, right? You're supposed to really be able to tell what's going on and then explain to people. And you're sitting through this thing and you're making jokes like, "Hey, if you're not vaccinated, punch yourself." It's like, now that's gone past sort of incompetence and into sort of evil, to be honest with you. So I lost a lot of respect. I never lost a connection with the audience, but with my sort of peers or the sort of famous comedians. But the same thing with sort of famous musicians or famous actors. It's really exposed to me how fake that whole industry is. These people that you're given to follow, and the way our culture encourages that. There's some of the most gutless, spineless people that there are available who literally, they're just, like I said before, they just want to keep their space at the table of being this extra special human being who's famous, And yeah, so I always, had no problem having a connection with the audience. It's the slime of the entertainment industry that I don't want to be involved in.
Fair enough. And you make a very good point about on the observational side of it, and not offending people, not necessarily saying that's an explicit sort of purpose in your material, but on that though, how do you yourself, and particularly now, how do you decide what will be something that you can effectively make a joke out of, and that you would, might for whatever reason decide not to? How do you filter stuff?
I just sort of go with what I want to talk about. I sort of go with what I think is amusing, or if there's a particular issue that I'd like to have people really consider about whether they want to go along with this sort of agenda. I'll try and make jokes about it, for example. So um, I don't really have a particular thing that I'm aiming to do. I just want to do um, what I think people will laugh at. But there's very few comedians that are actually doing that. A lot of the comedians these days, they're trying to do what their agent or their manager tells them that people want to hear about, which is usually very sort of monotone left wing stuff. There's very few people out there that are legitimately just saying what they think is funny. Most of it is sort of agenda driven. Um, but so yeah, I just sort of go with what I think is funny. Basically, it sounds pretty simple, but that's supposed to be what we're all doing, really.
Fair enough, and it works. Last year, British Comedian of the Year at the Comedy Store,
Hmm.
which is a fantastic achievement, and I'm sure would have given you a sense of enormous sort of pleasure and satisfaction, and in a way, one in the eye for a lot of the people that you've described sort of earlier on in this interview. But I think to people who have heard that, your story is one of having been shunned, completely pushed outside, and then you've had this amazing success at the Comedy Store, just to sort of clear the path as to how that happened. How does that work? How were you able to get to that?
I'll tell you how, Charles. I'll tell you exactly how. I don't enter comedy competitions because they're all crooked, essentially. They have judges, and the judges just pick the most left wing, or the person who ticks all the right boxes or whatever. But the British Comedian of the Year is the only competition that's voted for by the audience. So it's literally like whoever the audience thinks was the funniest wins. And that's the only reason I entered it. And the final was at the Comedy Store, which is one of my favorite places ever to do comedy. And I'm not allowed to do comedy there anymore. And no one's told me why. I always do very well when I'm there. Then all of a sudden, one day, I'm not welcome there anymore. They never told me why. So the opportunity to go back there, do comedy there, one last time. I don't know, maybe I'll go back. Maybe they'll have me back there again one day. Maybe not. But doesn't look like it. But the opportunity to go back there again and, have a great show and walk out with a giant check. But I see you later, guys. It was just too good to pass up, So, but the only reason I won that is because it's voted for by real people. It's a real competition. But nothing else in comedy works like that. Like if you go to the Edinburgh Comedy Festival, all the judges write for The Guardian, or, it's all, it's like, who's the funniest lesbian? It's not like who's the funniest person. You know what I'm saying? Or it's like, who's the funniest, person who's got some kind of, woke points or whatever. But they'll straight up tell you, like, dude, you're a straight white male. You're not getting anything here, especially if your comedy isn't left wing. It's like, the whole thing is a rub. There's no point someone like me, even going up there. And there's less and less people sort of going every year, and more audiences are sort of switching off to the way that comedy is run. But to take this even further, I don't even believe that they're looking for the funniest people anymore. I got a theory that there's certain people in the world that want to make the world ugly. Okay? So if you look at architecture, it's a great example. Films is another great example. Music is another great example. Comedy is another great example. All these things are awful compared to what they used to be. Architecture is one of the best examples I can give you. Look at the buildings from 400 years ago, how incredibly beautiful they are. Look at the latest libraries that they put up in places. Places just awful. They hurt your eyes. Statues in London are just grotesque, ugly. Music is the same. New music's awful. New comedy is awful. And I'm on the comedy circuit. I know who's funny and who isn't. Some of the people that they're putting on the television are the worst, Charles. They're not even like just okay or average. Some of them are the worst, like open mic level people. And they've got an agent and they're on TV. And I honestly believe that there's certain people that run the world and they hate joy. They hate joy. These people are so soulless. They're so disconnected from the creator that they want other people to suffer like they're suffering. And entertainment industry and culture is controlled a lot of times from the top down. Like in comedy, they have an arts council. An arts council, Charles. You know what I mean? Like bureaucrats in charge of the arts. Like, why would I need a bureaucrat to run stand-up comedy? And they do. These comedy clubs that I mentioned, when the pandemic hit, the Arts Council comes in and says, listen, we got millions of pounds to help you stay open. But if you want the money, you have to sign up to this, thing. And the thing is, when you reopen, it's going to be 50% women. It's going to be 50% black guys. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. And this way they come in and they run the whole show now, and places that I used to love, places like the Comedy Store, for example. But if you made it to the Comedy Store, it used to mean something. It used to mean like, oh, he's at the Comedy Store. He must be one of the best acts in the country. It's not that anymore, man. I walk past the Comedy Store, I see the names of the people performing, and like one of the people on there will be a real comedian. They'll put them on last. The other three, they might be good, they might not be that good, and it's because it's not run the way it used to be run. It's not run as in the funniest people get in here. Now it's like, right, every bill be 50% women, and 50% of the people doing stand-up comedy are not women. Let's say 20% of the acts are women, right? So now you're filling 50% of your bill from 20% of the people. It's not going to be as good as it was when you were just picking the funniest people that there are. And, it's a bit of a shame, that comedy has gone that way, but what hasn't gone that way, so but I think it actually runs a little bit deeper. I think on the outside, they'd like you to think that this is happening because we're really progressive and we love these certain groups of people. We want to help them. I don't think that's the case. I think they want to ruin everything. And this is their way of doing it. They don't really care about black people. They don't really care about lesbians. They don't care about women. They don't care about anyone. They want to ruin things. And this is their excuse to ruin things. They come in here under the guise of, we need to make sure that there's representation. But really, it's an excuse for them to pick people that aren't very good, put them up there. And then female comedians is a great example, right? I know loads of female comedians that are hilarious. They're never the ones that they put on the television. They're never the ones that they pick. They pick the ones that are not very good. And then people watch it and they go, she's not very good. Female comedians suck. And it's like, no, they don't. No, they don't. They could have picked the really good ones. The same way I don't think they're picking the really good male ones either. The same way I don't think they're Star Wars is a great example too. I used to love Star Wars. My brother used to love Star Wars. Star Wars used to be great. You watch the latest Star Wars stuff and fans of Star Wars are like, dude, are you trying to ruin this? It's all about, lesbian driven again for no reason. It's, everything's lesbian driven now. I don't mean it's not just lesbian, but you know what I'm saying? There's all like, especially kids programs, there's so much stuff in there that doesn't belong in there. And I just can't see it as being an accident anymore. I just see that they're just out there deliberately ruining not just the world of entertainment, but, most things.
You won't find any disagreement from me, certainly, nor the audience, I should imagine. And exactly as you point out, joy is now an act of resistance. Talk to me about Christianity, because I know this has become a significant part of your life. And I don't want to get, no need to go into any great sort of personal detail if you don't want to, but just the sort of broader principles. You've referred to it, you've touched on it a little bit sort of earlier on in the interview, but just tell me a bit about how that's come into your life and formed an important part
Sure.
of it and your sort of outlook.
Well, I started off just before I was a Christian, before I believed in God. I wanted to do the right thing, and not because I was a Christian or because I believe in God. I just wanted to do the right thing. I legitimately wanted to make people laugh. I wanted to bring people joy. And I wanted to try and do the right thing and help the world a bit. This food show, help people lose weight stuff. And when you start down that path, you'll quickly be destroyed, especially if you're trying to do that in the entertainment industry. And I was very quickly, completely and utterly destroyed for trying to do the right thing. And you're left with this realization like, hey, why does the world hate me so much for trying to do the right thing? Okay. And I lost everything when, my agent sort of counseled me. I lost my YouTube channel. All my friends in comedy turned against me on the same day, but I knew that this was all happening because I wanted to do the right thing. I didn't want to, a lot of comedy at the time was about dividing people. White people are racist, men are toxic. It's like men should hate women, whites should hate blacks. I was always trying to bring people together legitimately. And I would always be painted as the bad guy and this horrible person for doing this. It's like, Alistair, why won't you do material about how white people are racist? And I would say, well, I'd love to accept that, that's racist. You know what I mean? Like, I won't pick on white people for the color of their skin for the same reason I won't pick on black people, dude. It's wrong. And for having that attitude, it was going to cost me my career, but it was more important to me to say what was true and to try and do the right thing. And for that reason, I was completely destroyed to the point where after I lost my agent and stuff, I became very paranoid that there was this big sort of entity that run the world and I had pissed it off and they wanted to destroy my life. Now, I say paranoid. I was paranoid. That doesn't mean I was wrong. Like, now, especially looking back, I was quite correct, but I was, a very desperate, scared, and alone person, at the time. And I would say the Lord's Prayer over and over again because it made me feel better for some reason. And I found myself, God revealed himself to me personally at this time. And then I found myself reading the Bible. And there was something that Jesus said that changed my life completely. And that was, if the world hates you, which spoke to me because I just had my whole life destroyed for trying to do the right thing. And I knew in my heart that I was trying to do the right thing. And that's why I've been destroyed. And Jesus said, if the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. Now, Jesus was a man who went around healing people, telling us to love each other. And for that, he was tortured to death. If you think that you have any sort of story that is, oh, poor me, I was trying to do the right thing and something bad happened to me, you can't beat the story of Jesus, And before I heard that Jesus said this, I used to feel bad about the fact that the world hated me. I used to feel like negatively about it, like, oh, the world hates me. And then when I realized that what Jesus said was true, was, you know, if the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. If you look at what sort of a person Jesus was and how good he was, and the world hated him, right? So if the world hates you for trying to do the right thing, you shouldn't feel bad about that. You should feel as though you're following in the footsteps of Jesus. And that completely changed my whole life because I realized that it was true. It was true. And that married with my own personal experience, which is if you go out and you try and heal the world and you try and fix it, the people that run the world will hate you and they will destroy you. And there really is a war taking place. And your listeners, whether or not they believe in God, they'll be able to see the war that's raging right now between good and evil. And, the Bible speaks of this, and the Bible lets you know that if the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. Speaking of Jesus, if you're really on the side of good, if you really want to follow Christ, you will find yourself in complete opposition with the world. And that was where I started. I started listening to what Jesus had to say. And I came to the Bible not as a Christian, not as a believer in God, not someone that had been raised on it, but I did love the truth. If you're a good stand up comedian, you say, people will be like, oh, that's so true, and as they're laughing, right? I was all about the truth. And I realized I'd never read the Bible before, I'd never listened to what Jesus said. And I said to myself, I'm going to read every word that Jesus said, and I'm going to find whether or not it's true. And every single word that Jesus Christ spoke is 100% true. I couldn't find a fault in any of it. All of his logic, all his reasoning, everything that Jesus Christ has ever said is true. And this is a man who claims to be the Son of God. So if everything that I can find that he ever said true, right? The one thing that he's lying about is the fact that he's the Son of God. I don't think so. Like, I'll give you an example. They asked Jesus, what's the golden rule? What's the one thing that we should be doing? And he says, treat other people as you would have them treat you, right? Now, if everyone in the whole world followed that one simple rule, if everyone in the world treated each other as we would expect ourselves to be treated, what sort of world would we be living in? If everyone did that, we'd be living in heaven. So I look at that and I think, well, this guy has just told us the way to heaven in one sentence. If we followed that, we'd all be living in heaven. So, I can't get away from the truth that were in the words of everything that Jesus Christ spoke. And not only that, his practical example of if you try to do the right thing, this world will hate you. That spoke to me as well. And despite from that, the multiple signs that God has given to me that he's real and he's looking out for me. I honestly don't believe I would have my comedy career back if it wasn't for God. I don't believe I'd still, be here. I wouldn't have my family. Everything I have comes from God, and I can go into detail. I'm not sure if you'd want me to, but multiple times where it's been unmistakably God that has intervened in my life. That it's the most important thing to me. is to do his work, is to um, live a good life, the type of life that he would want me to do, and just do what he wants for me to do rather than what I want for myself.
Fascinating. And it's obviously been a huge sort of solace to you, and clearly has shaped the way that you conduct yourself now, sort of at least on a sort of spiritual and psychological level. In terms of the practical sort of delivery of your philosophy, has it made a difference? We're talking about the world around us being so ugly and being deliberately so, and the sowing of division and all the rest of it. Do you see a way, a sort of collective way out of this?
A collective way out of this? Well, I mean, the collective way out of this is Jesus Christ. There's no one else that can save this world. That's what the Bible says, and trust me, that's what I believe. And that, I think, is the great conspiracy. That's the one thing that they don't want people finding out, that God is real. And if we turn back to him, all of this can be fixed. If you look at the United Kingdom, for example, as a country, people often talk about the West, the fall of the West, and as though there's some Western way of life that has built this country. This is not a Western country. This is a Christian country. It's following Christian values that have made this country what it is, that gave this country the empire that it had. It's because we believed in God. If you go back and you listen to these songs, Land of Hope and Glory, you listen to the words, we're thanking God for making this nation great. Everyone in this nation, pretty much, you go back 500 years, almost everyone believed in God. If you didn't believe in God, you'd be a weirdo. People would think you were crazy if you didn't believe in God. We used to read the Bible. We used to follow God's rules, try and be a godly people, and things were amazing. About 100 years ago, we decided we weren't going to read the Bible anymore. We're not going to try and love each other and be selfless and be honorable and be righteous. We're going to be selfish. And we're going to watch the television, and we're going to follow celebrities, and we're going to throw the Bible in the name of Jesus Christ in the bin, and we're going to replace it with Ant and Dec. And now we look around and we wonder where everything went wrong. It's not the fall of Western civilization. It's the fall of Christian civilization. We've thrown God in the bin. We don't think we need God anymore. And the Bible is very clear. Many examples of throughout history when this happened, when a nation of people turn their back on God, things get terrible. And if you look at the United Kingdom or America or anywhere around the world where, people, they don't believe in God anymore. They don't try and be holy anymore. We look down these days on people that try to be holy. So do you understand that being a Christian is about sacrificing yourself and helping others and trying to be kind and looking after the poor and looking after widows and orphans and being selfless? And when everyone starts working like that, nations rise, communities rise. We've thrown that away, and we don't see that things are getting worse, and they're getting worse, and they're getting worse because we replaced God with technology. When people started watching the television, and if you look back at old entertainment, it used to be so wholesome. It used to be hello and welcome, and I will be playing the piano, and my wife will be singing and playing the harmonica. You look at it now, it's twerking and WAP and it's gross, Charles. You look at a music video now, it's softcore satanic pornography. I'm not even joking. I wish I was joking. Our culture is just being poisoned. And I imagine there's a large part of your audience that perhaps don't believe in God, but you might not see God, but I bet you can see the devil when you look at entertainment and when you look at, you don't have to look very hard when you watch these the Grammys or even the Olympics and opening ceremonies of Commonwealth Games. I've got some great material of mine where I'll do a commentary over the top of the opening ceremony for the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, for example, which is a giant satanic ritual. The Olympic Games, London, giant satanic ritual. And when you listen to me commentate about these things, and anyone that's got an understanding of the Bible and the scripture knows that these people, they know what they're doing. They know about the Bible. They know that God is real. And a lot of the stuff that they put out there in your face is the exact opposite of what God says and how God says to behave, down to God made them male and female. We're living, the opposite of that. You don't have to get very far into the Bible before you realize that our world is structured to be the exact opposite of the way God wants you to live and the way God says to do things. And that is the reason why this country is falling apart. That's the reason why the world is falling apart, is because we're turning away from God. And the Bible even says that this is going to happen. The Bible even tells you that towards the end of the age, which is where I believe that we are, people will turn away from God in huge droves and things will get worse and worse and worse. And this is, clearly the age we're living in. The 666, the mark of the beast, the people that have read the Bible and they understand scripture, most people that don't read the Bible, they won't understand that the Bible is history pre-written. You can read what's going to happen in the next 50, 100 years in the Bible right now, and you can watch it happen in front of your face. People that actually take time to read and study the Bible will realize that all of human history pretty much has been played out in the Bible, written before it happened. The more people investigate the Bible, the more you'll realize that, there's a reason why the whole world used to be glued to this book nonstop, and family was important at that time. Marriage was important at that time, and things were good. We've thrown all that away for Love Island, Fast and Furious, and we wonder why things are degrading. But when you ask, is there a collective solution to all this? Indeed, there is. It's not too late for this nation and its people to turn back to God, and He will heal this land, But that is the solution. But most people, they don't want to hear that solution. That's, they want a man to save them. They want Trump to save them or Nigel Farage to save them. But there's no man that can reverse this. There's no man that can bring peace to the earth. There is a man that's going to come and offer peace to the earth, but that is the man the Bible says to truly look out for. That is the Antichrist, the man that will combine all the world's religions and all politics and rule the whole world, and he'll be the best man, and he'll be so peaceful and great. For people that don't believe the Bible, they don't believe in God, just remember that I told you this, and just if it happens, remember that I told you this. So this is the period of history that I believe that we're in. We're in the period where people are falling away from God and things are getting worse and worse. And people should be encouraged that, Jesus is coming back. God is going to return, and the important thing is to get right with Him before He does.
I think you're absolutely right. For people, regardless of their particular belief system, the descriptions you cite specifically of where things have not just gone wrong, but are being apparently deliberately made to go wrong is something that I don't think people can really contend with at all. And of course, from, in particular, in recent times, the year 2020 and thereafter, where people were incited to do the most abominable things to one another, brings me on to, I suppose, the aspect of contrition and forgiveness. And I suppose I wonder if this relates back at all to comedy, in that we've heard, in raking over what has gone in the last 4 years, there's been many sort of statements along the lines of, oh, well, mistakes were made. We didn't know at the time that was going to be so awful. Have you had people, in effect, sort of crawling back to you, particularly after what we were talking about earlier with the success at the Comedy Store, crawling back to you saying, okay, now I see what you were talking about. I see that you're right. And people from, whether agents in the past or anyone, has anyone had the spine, I suppose, effectively to come back to you and say, you were right, I see what you were.
I don't think so.
Really?
I don't think so. No, I don't think any. I don't think so. I'm not expecting anyone to either. I'm not sure. I don't think anyone said, you're right. And honestly, I'm not particularly, expecting them to. Yeah, I don't think that's happening, Charles.
I suppose, honestly, I can't say I'm particularly surprised, but it's always worth asking, because you never quite know who's going to pop out of the woodwork at what time. But then, so looking ahead, I suppose more on a personal level rather than the macro level,
Yeah.
But bearing in mind where your sort of work is at the minute, have you got anything in the pipeline, particularly related to your belief system as it is now? Is that influencing any of the projects that you're either concentrating on at the minute or in the
Yes.
future?
I'm doing an
Do tell.
audiobook called Christianity for Dummies. That's a working title. I might change the title, where I just want to sort of package the message of Christianity and the message of the Bible into something that is easy for people to listen to. That is that is amusing. I think I might have a way to capture people's attention. Like, for example, most people would say, I haven't read the Bible because I don't believe in God, right? Well, I would say, you don't believe in God because you haven't read the Bible, right? The evidence that God is real is in the Bible. So you've sort of got things the wrong way. So I'd like to give people, an incentive or just an idea about, hey, some of the incredible wisdom and stuff that you can read in the Bible that will just completely change your life. There isn't a problem that I've had in my life that the answer isn't in the Bible. It really is the most fantastic, incredible, life-changing book. And I wanted to just do a sort of audio book that would just sort of encourage people to, you know, pick it up and get involved and ask God to come into their life, and just because it'll change your whole life. It did for me. So, that's I guess influences my work.
It sounds like a huge undertaking. How on earth do you set about doing that? I mean, how did you start with that?
I interviewed a lady called Claire Craig, who I really like, and she'd done an audiobook. And I was just like, oh, audiobooks are a thing. Hey, I'll do an audiobook. And that was it. And I put it on sale on my website for pre-orders, and a bunch of people pre-ordered it. And I was like, well, now I've got to write it. So I sort of just snookered myself. And now I guess I really need to get down to finishing it. And so yeah, that's what happened.
Fantastic. Well, that will be one to look forward to. But tell me, I mean, I don't want to pin you down necessarily, but when do you think, or when have you committed to publishing it?
I said it would be out this year, so I'm absolutely terrified.
Okay.
So I've got 6 months left.
Yes.
So I said it would be out in 2024. Let's assume that I stick to that.
I was going to give you the chance of not actually mentioning the year and holding publication of this interview, but there we go, it's out there. Well, that's one to look forward to. So we've got the book's coming up. Tell me forthcoming gigs and that sort of thing, bearing in mind we're July 2024. Is there anything on the immediate horizon that people might like to sort of look out for you at?
It's actually, believe it or not, it's quite difficult for me to even get the rooms to put on my own shows. That circuit is quite closely controlled. Although I did just do my own show in London on Tuesday, and that sold out. So that was quite encouraging. So I'm going to be doing a few more of those dates. So Tanya Edwards is a comedian that I'm working with. She's great as well. She's very much along the sort of same lines as me and you and most of your audience probably. And we do an hour-long show together. So we're going to try and get a sort of nationwide tour going for that, to get a bunch of dates and put them together. So I'd like people to look out for that, because that'd be a great opportunity to come see me and her together. So we're just working on the moment about putting, which towns we can get to and which venues will give us a room and when and that sort of thing. So that is very much, something I'd like to look out for.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll look out for further details, and we'll absolutely put that out when there is more on that. And otherwise, just sort of day to day, for people who would like to find out more about what you do, what you have done, where should they go to look for your material?
Well, you can find me on Locals. You familiar with that? Locals. It's like you search my name on there, and Rumble. I'm on there. You can search me out on those places. I guess Locals and Rumble. You just search my name. You might find me. They're going to let you. That'd be the best place.
Super. Alistair, that's fantastic. I think we'll probably think about drawing to a close now.
Nice.
If you had any sort of concluding remarks on anything that we've covered, I think now would be the time to to get that out. It's been quite a roller coaster. We've covered a lot of big topics, and I think that what I would say from my point of view is that the start point, the insights into the sort of comedy environment have been completely eye-opening, and I think would have been for the audience. And then again, the passage through and into Christianity and how that's shaping your worldview and indeed your outlook is phenomenal. But just if there was anything you particularly had to say to sort of round off, that would be lovely.
Oh well, I'm not sure. I summarized the whole thing. I don't know. I don't know that I have anything. I don't know if I have anything powerful to conclude. Be nice to each other. How about that? There you go. That's my message. That's it. That's all I've got, Charles. All I've got.
Simple, to the point, very effective.
Effective.
I think we like that. I think that will go very well. Now,
Excellent.
as I said at the beginning, this has been an interview for UK Column, so please share it widely. Look at ukcolumn.org for notes and relevant links. If you are able to support UK Column financially for £5 a month and you're not already doing so, please do consider it. And it just remains for me to say thank you very much indeed for Alistair. It's been a real delight to have you here, and keep in touch, please. Thanks very
Charles.
much.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you very much. See you soon.
Yeah.